To believe these are merely stories is the most dangerous lie you can tell yourself. You see them as tales whispered around a fire, a momentary chill to be forgotten with the morning light. But I have seen the truth in the bottom of a scryer's bowl, in the reflection of a cracked mirror held up to the void. These are not stories. They are echoes. They are scars left upon the world, psychic wounds that bleed into the ether, and I am the unfortunate soul who can feel their phantom pain. The borders men draw in the dust are not just lines of contention. They are sutures over a festering wound, and the whispers that escape are carried on the night wind, seeking an ear to listen. They found mine, and now they will find yours. The journeys they speak of are not measured in miles, but in pieces of the soul left behind, like breadcrumbs for a beast that has no name. Imagine a path paved not with dirt, but with the cold ashes of discarded hopes. Each step is a prayer that goes unanswered, a bargain made with a silent, indifferent god of dust and thorns. I have walked these paths in my visions, my feet sinking into the memory of their despair. I have felt the sun not as a source of life, but as a predatory eye in a bleached white sky, waiting to peel back the last layers of sanity. This is a pilgrimage in reverse, a descent into a terrestrial underworld where the only guides are shadows, and the only promise is an endless horizon of suffering. The first vision that came to me was not of a ghost, but of a thirst. It was a living entity, a dry, rasping creature that clung to the back of the throat and drank the light from a person's eyes. I witnessed a group of travelers, their faces masks of cracked clay, following a trickle of water that was a mirage, a cruel joke whispered by the land itself. They were led by the promise of salvation, but the stream bed was only dust, and the bleached bones of those who had believed the same lie before them. In the silence, I heard it, a sound like a creaking door swinging in a house that was never built. It was the sound of the veil thinning, of reality giving way under the immense pressure of their desperation. And in that thinning veil, something stepped through. It wasn't a spirit in a white sheet, but a distortion in the air, a shimmer of heat that coalesced into a form that was almost human. It offered them a gourd, its surface impossibly cool, beaded with moisture that defied the hellish sun. Its face was a blur, a canvas of shifting features, as if it were a composite of every soul that had ever perished in that wasteland. Its voice was the rustle of dried leaves, promising an oasis just over the next rise. It was the land's hunger given a body, a lure for the weak, and as they reached for the water, I saw their hands pass through the illusion, their last ounce of hope turning to cold ashes in their mouths. This is the first secret you must understand. The most terrifying things are not those that want to kill you, but those that want to feed on your hope. They are psychic parasites that thrive in the liminal spaces, the borderlands where the rules of the living world fray and unravel. The greatest mistake is to believe the horror is only human. The cartels, the bandits, they are but the vulgar, physical manifestations of a much older, deeper malice. The true predators are the ones that hunt the soul, the entities drawn to the scent of profound despair, like sharks to the scent of DRI'd blood in the water. They offer a hand in the darkness, but their grip is the cold of the grave. Now, imagine this, a young woman, separated from her group, lost in a jungle so dense, the sunlight is a forgotten memory. The air is thick, wet, and alive with the chittering of unseen things. Every shadow seems to reach for her. Every vine seems to twist into the shape of a grasping hand. She is not just lost in a place. She is lost in a time outside of time. The sounds of the modern world are gone, replaced by a primal, suffocating silence. It is in this silence that she first hears the whisper. It is not in her language, nor any language of man. It is a series of clicks and whistles, a melody that seems to pull at the very marrow of her bones, promising safety, promising a way out. She follows the sound, a moth drawn to a flame it cannot comprehend. It leads her to a clearing where a single, ancient tree stands, its branches like skeletal fingers clawing at the canopy. At its base sits a small child, weaving a doll from twigs and moss. The child doesn't look up, but its song continues, an impossible, ancient lullaby. The woman, desperate for human contact, approaches, but as she gets closer, she sees the child's eyes are not eyes at all. They are pools of stagnant water, reflecting a starless night sky. The doll it is weaving has the woman's face, its tiny limbs twisted in a posture of agony. The child is a trap, a lure woven from innocence and dread. Listen carefully, because this is the moment everything changes. The child finally looks up, and its mouth opens far too wide, emitting not the lullaby, but the screech of 1,000 birds of prey. The shadows under the trees detach and rise up, coalescing into tall, thin figures with limbs like branches, their forms shifting and indistinct. They are the true guardians of this wood, the ones who claim the lost as their own. The child was merely their bait. Her scream is swallowed by the jungle's throat, and she becomes another whisper in the leaves, another warning that goes unheard. She crossed a border, not of nations, but of realities, and there was no one there to check her passport. Do you see now? The world you inhabit is a thin crust over a roiling abyss of forgotten truths and ancient hungers. These journeys, born of desperation, are unwitting rituals. They are pilgrimages that tear holes in the fabric of your perceived reality, allowing things from the other side to peer through, and sometimes to reach through and pull you in. The fear, the pain, the sheer force of will required to take such a journey. It is a beacon, it is a lighthouse, calling out to things that drift in the endless dark between worlds. They are drawn to this intense, raw human emotion, like carrion crows to a fresh kill. I remember a vision of a train, the infamous La Bestia. It was not just a machine of steel and iron, but a great metal serpent snaking through the night, its back covered in clinging, hopeful souls. To the mundane eye, it was a dangerous passage, but to my second sight, it was a river of spirits, a Styx on rails, carrying the living and the dead alike. The wind that whipped past the riders was filled with voices, the moans of those who had fallen, their spirits now bound to the train's eternal journey. They whispered warnings, tugged at clothing, their touch a phantom cold that promised only the grave. Their presence was a constant, chilling reminder of the price of a single misstep. One man, I saw him clearly, was riding between the cars, his body numb from the cold and the vibration. He felt a small hand slip into his. He looked down, expecting to see a child, another desperate passenger, but there was no one there. Yet the grip was firm, cold, and undeniably real. A child's voice whispered directly into his ear, a voice that sounded like wind through a broken cross. Don't look down. The ground is hungry. The man froze, terrorist spike of ice in his heart. He understood that this was not a living child, but an echo, a ghost tethered to the train, forever replaying its final moments. It was a guardian angel from the other side, a soul whose own tragedy now served as a warning to others. He dared not move, every muscle screaming, until the train slowed for a siding. When he finally looked down, he saw the mangled track, the jagged metal that would have torn him to pieces had he fallen. The phantom hand was gone. This is a crucial point. Not all the whispers from beyond are malevolent. Some are echoes of compassion, fragments of souls who cannot rest until they have prevented another from sharing their fate. But to receive such a message, you must be stripped bare, pushed to the absolute limit of human endurance, where the boundary between life and death becomes a permeable, shimmering curtain. It is a terrible kindness, born from unimaginable tragedy. These borderlands are littered with broken things, not just broken down vehicles or discarded belongings, but broken promises, broken lives, broken crosses, planted in the dust where a body was found. Each one is an anchor, a point where a powerful emotion has tethered a spirit to the physical world. I have seen them glow in the twilight with a faint, sorrowful light, pulsating with the final, desperate prayer of a dying soul. To walk past them is to walk through a gallery of silent screams. The air around them is heavy, thick with unresolved grief and a palpable sense of injustice. The crows that gather on them are not just birds, they are silent watchers, guardians of these forgotten tragedies. I had a vision of a group finding shelter for the night in an abandoned shack. It was barely more than a collection of rotting wood and rusted metal, but it was a reprieve from the biting wind. As they tried to sleep, one of them noticed something etched into the dirt floor. It was a map, crude and strange, but it seemed to depict the very area they were in, marked with symbols that made no sense. There was a symbol of a cracked mirror over a certain canyon, and a symbol of a creaking door over a mountain pass. It was a warning, left by someone who had come before, someone who had seen the true nature of the landscape and the entities that inhabited it. As darkness consumed the shack, a low scratching sound began at the door. It was a steady, rhythmic sound, like claws on old wood. There was no animal out there. The sound was too deliberate, too intelligent. One of the men, against the frantic whispers of the others, opened the door a crack. He saw nothing but the empty, moonlit desert. But when he closed the door, he brought the cold in with him. Not the cold of the night air, but a deep, predatory cold that settled in the room like a shroud. The scratching stopped because the thing it belonged to was now inside with them, an unseen presence whose breath was the stench of the grave and cold ashes. The symbols on the floor, they were not just a map, but a key. The cracked mirror represented a place where reality was fractured, where reflections did not behave as they should, where one could see not their own face, but the face of their death. The creaking door marked a gateway, a point where the veil was so thin that a simple mountain pass became a portal for things that should not walk the earth. The person who drew that map had not survived, but they had left a testament, a final, desperate act of communion with those who would follow. The horror is not just in the encounter, but in the slow dawning realization that you are walking through a landscape that is actively, malevolently conscious. The whispers, they tell me of bargains made in the dead of night, not with human traffickers, but with older, darker things that dwell in the shadows of the crossroads. I see a man on his knees, his family weak from hunger. He has nothing left to offer but his own soul. He speaks into the darkness, pleading with anything that might be listening for safe passage, and something answers. It does not speak in words, but in a sudden gust of wind that smells of dried blood and ozone. A path opens before him, one he did not see before, and a strange, luminous moss begins to glow on the rocks, lighting the way forward. He guides his family along this new, impossible path. They find a small spring of fresh water and fruit on a tree that should be barren. It seems like a miracle, a divine intervention, but the man knows better. He feels the price of this assistance coiling in his gut. He does not see the being he bargained with, but he feels its presence constantly, a heavy weight on his shoulders, a cold spot at the back of his neck. He has become a beacon for it, and it follows him, patiently waiting to collect its due. The safe passage is not a gift, it is a leash. He has traded a quick death in the desert for an eternity of servitude to a nameless horror. What the stars don't tell you openly is that desperation is a form of currency in the other world. It is a powerful, volatile energy that can be used to tear open doorways and summon things. When you are pushed to the edge, when all hope is gone, you are at your most vulnerable and your most powerful. You become a living key, capable of unlocking gates that have been sealed for millennia. The entities that wait behind these gates do not care about your life or your dreams of a better future. They see only the raw, brilliant energy of your soul, and they are drawn to it with an insatiable, eternal hunger. This is the ultimate cruel paradox of the journey. I have seen the faces of the lost in my dreams. They are not frightening. They are profoundly, heartbreakingly sad. I saw a young boy, no older than 7, standing by a lonely stretch of railroad tracks. He was translucent, a figure made of moonlight and memory. He was playing with a small, rusted toy car, pushing it back and forth in the dust. He wasn't trying to scare anyone. He was just waiting for the parents he was separated from in the chaos of boarding the train, not understanding that he was dead, that his small body lay in a ditch not 50 yards away. His spirit was trapped in a loop of confusion and longing, an echo of innocence in a place of utter brutality. This is the nature of so many of these hauntings. They are not monstrous entities, but tragic fragments of human lives, cut short with such violence and sorrow that they cannot move on. They are psychic imprints, emotional residue left on the landscape. They are a testament to the fact that a human life is more than just flesh and bone. It is energy. It is consciousness. And when that life is extinguished in trauma, that energy can become stuck. It leaks into the environment, creating cold spots, disembodied voices, and apparitions that are doomed to repeat their final moments for eternity. They are the most tragic victims of these journeys. To witness such a thing is to feel a piece of your own soul crack. It is a coldness that no fire can warm. It forces you to confront the fragility of your own existence and the profound injustice of a world that allows such things to happen. These are not just ghost stories. They are sacred testaments. They are the final, unheard cries of people who were rendered invisible in life and have become unforgettable in death. Their whispers are a demand to be remembered, a plea to bear witness to their fate, and I cannot refuse them. I see their faces when I close my eyes. I wonder if you are beginning to see them too. Do you feel this dark message was meant for you? Let us speak of the concept of the coyote, the human smuggler. In the stories whispered to me, this figure often undergoes a terrifying transformation. It begins as a man, promising passage for a price. But as the journey progresses into the desolate wilderness, away from all witnesses, his nature begins to change. I saw a vision of one such guide leading a group through a labyrinthine canyon at dusk. His instructions became cryptic, his laughter like the call of a crow. One of the migrants, a woman with a keen spiritual sense, noticed that the guide cast no shadow, even when he stood directly in the light of their lanterns. The air grew cold, and the guide's form began to shimmer, to lose its solidity. His face became a swirling vortex of sand and darkness, his eyes glowing embers of ancient malice. He was not a human trafficker. He was a spirit of the land, a trickster entity that had existed long before any borders were drawn. He did not lead them toward a new life. but deeper into his domain, into a place where the rocks themselves were alive and hungry. The canyon walls seemed to press in, the path behind them vanishing into impenetrable darkness. They were not being smuggled, they were being herded like cattle to a slaughterhouse, not made of wood and steel, but of rock and shadow and eternal despair. This is where everything changes for you, your understanding of these tales. The journey itself is a ritual of initiation. It strips away the traveler's identity, their name, their past, their connection to the world of law and society. It makes them anonymous, liminal beings who belong to no place. And in this state of non-belonging, they become visible to things that are also outside the normal order. The coyote spirit is an embodiment of this treacherous passage. It is the promise of help that is actually a promise of damnation. It is the ultimate betrayal, where the one you trust with your life is revealed to be the very thing that intends to consume your soul. Another vision came to me, this one of a makeshift camp, a brief respite for a group of exhausted travelers. They shared what little food they had around a small, sputtering fire. The firelight cast strange, dancing shadows on the surrounding trees. One man, exhausted, fell into a fitful sleep. In his dream, he was standing in the same camp, but it was daytime. A beautiful woman with eyes like polished obsidian was beckoning to him from the edge of the woods. She promised him a place of rest, a paradise where there was no more suffering. In his dream, he followed her, his heart filled with a profound sense of peace he hadn't felt in years. He woke with a start. The woman's image burned into his mind. He couldn't shake the feeling that the dream was real, that she was waiting for him. Despite the warnings of his companions, he walked to the edge of the woods, to the very spot he had seen in his dream. He saw nothing. Disappointed, he turned to go back, but as he did, he glanced at a pool of stagnant rainwater. In the reflection, he did not see himself. He saw the beautiful woman from his dream, standing right behind him. Her face now a horrifying rictus of hunger, her teeth sharpened to points, and behind her, reflected in the water, were the skeletal remains of countless others who had accepted her invitation. The reflection was the truth. He scrambled away, his mind shattered by the vision in the cracked mirror of the water's surface. He understood that she was a succubus of the wilderness, a spirit that feeds not on lust, but on the deep, aching desire for rest and peace. She preys on the utterly exhausted, those whose will to continue is nearly extinguished. She offers the illusion of paradise to lure them to their deaths. The water did not lie. A reflection, you see, is a doorway. It is a window into the true nature of things, and sometimes looking into it shows you the predators that walk unseen right beside you. He survived, but he left a piece of his sanity beside that stagnant pool, a toll paid to the thing in the woods. These accounts are not isolated incidents. They are points on a map of fear, a cartography of the supernatural geography that underlies the physical world. There are places, hotspots, where the membrane between our reality and the next is thin and torn. These are often places of great natural power, or places that have been soaked in the energies of extreme human suffering. A lonely mountain pass, a specific stretch of desert, a forgotten ruin in the jungle. These places become charged. They develop a consciousness of their own. To pass through them is to risk attracting the attention of the things that have made these blighted landscapes their home. I saw a family hiding from a patrol in an old abandoned church near the border. It was a ruin, the roof caved in, a broken cross hanging askew over the altar. They thought it was a holy place, a sanctuary, but a church is only a sanctuary if it is filled with faith. An abandoned church, one left to decay, becomes something else entirely. It becomes a hollow vessel, an empty house that any wandering spirit can claim as its own. As night fell, they began to hear a faint, discordant organ music, though the instrument was a wreck of splintered wood and rusted pipes. A cold wind swept through the nave, carrying the scent of incense and dried blood. They huddled together in terror as a shadowy form began to coalesce at the altar. It was tall and stooped, wearing the tattered vestments of a priest, but where its face should have been, there was only a swirling darkness, a void that seemed to drink the moonlight. It raised a skeletal hand, not in blessing, but in judgment. The family realized with dawning horror that this was the spirit of a long-dead priest, one who had lost his faith, who had made some terrible, unholy pact within these walls. He was no longer a man of God, but a warden of this desecrated space, and he viewed them as trespassers, as sinners to be punished. They had sought sanctuary and found damnation instead. What the stars don't tell you openly is that symbols have power, but that power is neutral. A cross can be a ward against evil, but a broken cross can become an antenna for it. A church can be a house of God, but an empty church can become a devil's parlor. The intention and energy that people pour into a place or an object is what defines its spiritual nature. These travelers, in their desperation, stumbled into a place where holiness had curdled into its opposite, where faith had rotted into a malevolent hunger. They escaped, but the icy touch of that priest's judgment would follow them for the rest of their days, a cold ash in the center of their souls. The night is a different country. The rules change. Your senses, so reliable during the day, become your worst enemies. Every sound is magnified. Every shadow becomes a crouching beast. I have seen through the eyes of those who walk in the darkness, and I can tell you that the fear of human predators is only the beginning. The night belongs to other things. It is their time. I saw a group walking in single file, the moon a sliver of bone in the sky. They spoke in whispers, trying to be invisible, but they were not invisible to the things that see with more than just eyes. One of them, a young man at the back of the line, felt a sudden, intense cold. He stopped, a shiver running down his spine that had nothing to do with the temperature. He looked back, and in the faint starlight, he saw them, figures, standing motionless at the side of the path they had just walked. They were tall and emaciated, their skin the color of river clay, their eyes dark pits in their skulls. They were the spirits of those who had died of exposure, forever bound to the cold that killed them. They did not move, they did not threaten, they just watched. Their silent, empty gaze was a prophecy, a vision of the fate that awaited anyone who faltered. The young man understood. This was not a haunting, it was a test. The spirits were a manifestation of the desert's will, a challenge to his own spirit. To show fear was to admit defeat, to invite the cold into his own heart. He turned away, his jaw set, and forced himself to keep walking, to put one foot in front of the other, even as he felt their collective gaze like a physical weight on his back. He did not look back again. This is a crucial lesson from the Whispers. Sometimes the greatest horror is not an attack, but a silent, knowing presence. A presence that shows you the abyss and dares you to fall in. He survived because he refused to give his fear to them. These visions, these echoes, they are not meant to simply frighten. They are a form of wisdom, a dark and terrible Gnosticism. They are knowledge that is paid for with pain and terror. They teach you that the universe is far more complex and dangerous than you can possibly imagine. They teach you that there are other laws besides the laws of physics and the laws of man. There are ancient primal laws of spirit and energy, of sacrifice and consequence. To undertake such a journey is to be thrust unwillingly into this secret university of suffering, and the lessons you learn are carved into your soul with a blade of ice. I often see images of discarded belongings, a single child's shoe, a faded photograph, a rosary tangled in a thorny bush. These are not just trash, they are artifacts, imbued with the potent emotional energy of their former owners. They are like batteries of hope, fear, and love, left to discharge their power into the earth. I saw a vision of a woman who found such a rosary. Her own had been lost, and she clutched this one as a talisman. But as she held it, she was flooded with images, with the memories of the woman who had owned it before. She felt the other woman's exhaustion, her terror as she was separated from her family, her final, desperate prayer as she collapsed. The rosary was not a protection. It was a conduit, a channel for the unresolved trauma of its previous owner. The woman was overwhelmed, her own identity momentarily subsumed by the ghost's agony. She threw the rosary down, but it was too late. The echo had latched onto her. For the rest of her journey, she was haunted by the phantom presence of the other woman, a constant whisper of sorrow in her mind, a shadow that followed just behind her. She had inadvertently picked up a spiritual attachment, a hitchhiker from the other side. She had learned a terrible lesson in these desperate lands. Even an object of faith can become a vessel for a curse. This is the subtle danger, the one no one warns you about. It is not just your body that is at risk, but the integrity of your own spirit. You are surrounded by the psychic debris of thousands who have gone before you, a sea of powerful, undigested emotions. It is all too easy to become entangled in someone else's tragedy, to have your own spirit stained by their despair. You must be a fortress, your will a shield. But after weeks of exhaustion, hunger, and fear, who has the strength to maintain such a shield? This is why the journey breaks so many, not just physically, but spiritually, leaving them haunted shells of their former selves. These whispers I share are a heavy burden. Every soul that joins feeds the voice that whispers from the darkness. It is a shared burden that allows the telling to continue. Let's speak of sounds. The desert, the jungle, they are not silent places, but there are sounds, and then there are sounds. I have heard, through the ears of others, the sound of a baby crying in the middle of a barren wasteland where no child could possibly be. It is a lure, of course, a sound designed to prey on the most basic human instinct of compassion. Those who follow it are led off the path, deeper into the wilderness, until they are hopelessly lost. The crying fades, and they are left alone with the silence and the dawning, sickening realization that they have been tricked by something inhuman. Then there is the mimicry. I have seen a vision of a man walking alone at night, who hears his name called. The voice is that of his wife, the wife he is trying to reach. It sounds so real, so full of love and longing, that for a moment his heart soars with impossible hope. He calls back, running toward the sound, but the voice leads him in circles, always just out of reach, its tone subtly changing, becoming mocking, distorted, cruel. It is a predator that has learned to use his own love as a weapon against him. It has plucked the memory of his wife's voice from his mind and turned it into a poison dart. The psychological toll of such an experience is incalculable. This is the nature of the true hunters of the borderlands. They are intelligent, they are patient, they study their prey, they learn your hopes, your fears, your loves. and they weave them into intricate traps. They do not need claws or fangs when they can shatter your mind with a single perfectly chosen word. They understand that the easiest way to break the body is to first break the spirit. The creaking door of your sanity is pushed open not by a physical force, but by the whisper of a familiar voice in a place where it has no right to be. And once that door is open, anything can come walking through. The earth itself holds memory. I have seen this. The ground on which a terrible act of violence was committed becomes stained, not with blood that can be washed away, but with a psychic residue, an echo of the pain and terror that can be felt by those who are sensitive enough. I witnessed a group making camp for the night on what seemed like a peaceful patch of ground, but as they slept, they were all plagued by the same nightmare, a brutal ambush, the flash of blades, screams of agony, the coppery scent of fresh, warm blood. They were not dreaming of their own fears. They were experiencing a historical echo, a memory imprinted upon the very soil beneath them. They awoke in a collective panic, the dream so vivid, so real, that they could still taste the fear in their mouths. They packed their things and fled into the night, not knowing what they were running from, only that the ground they had slept on was Peol Fane. It was a place where the veil had been torn by an act of supreme violence, creating a permanent wound in the fabric of reality. To sleep there was to invite the memory of that violence into their own minds, to let the ghosts of that moment replay their deaths, using the sleeper's own consciousness as a stage. The land itself had become a haunted house without walls. What the stars don't tell you is that a place can be murdered, just like a person. It can be killed by an act of immense cruelty, its life force replaced by a repeating echo of death and pain. These places are like psychic landmines, waiting for a living soul to stumble upon them and trigger the stored memory. The danger is not that the ghosts will harm you physically, but that the experience will leave a shard of that trauma embedded in your own soul, a piece of someone else's nightmare that you will carry with you forever. It is a contagion of sorrow, a virus of the spirit. And the borderlands are filled with such infected, blighted places. There is a concept in folklore of the fetch, or the doppelgänger, a spirit that takes on the appearance of a living person. I have heard whispers of this phenomenon in the most terrifying of contexts. I saw a man in a group who began to act strangely. He became sullen, withdrawn. His friends noticed that his eyes seemed different, darker, emptier. One night, while he was on watch, another man in the group woke up and saw him standing at the edge of the camp, staring out into the darkness. And standing right beside him was a perfect, identical copy of himself. The two figures stood in silence for a moment, and then the copy smiled, a wide, predatory smile. The real man turned and saw his friend was awake, his eyes wide with terror. The copy simply dissolved into the shadows. From that day on, the man was never the same. He was haunted, claiming that the other him was following them, waiting for a chance to take his place. His companions thought he was losing his mind from the stress of the journey. But then, small things started to happen. Possessions would go missing from one man's pack and appear in the haunted man's. He would be heard whispering to himself in a voice that was not his own. The entity was not just following him, it was trying to slowly, methodically erase him, to usurp his life one small piece at a time. This is the ultimate horror of identity, to not only face death, but to face the complete and utter annihilation of yourself, to be replaced by a soulless copy, a shadow wearing your face. The entity was a thing of pure envy. a being with no identity of its own that sought to steal one from the living. It was a spiritual cuckoo, laying its egg in the nest of a man's soul. Whether the man survived or was eventually replaced, I do not know. The vision ended, leaving only the chilling image of two identical figures standing in the dark, one real, one a hungry void in the shape of a man. The thought alone is a cold razor against the throat. I ask you again, for the whispers demand it. Do you feel this dark message was meant for you? Let the darkness in the comments speak your truth. Let's return to the symbols. The crow. In many cultures, it is a psychopomp, a creature that travels between the world of the living and the world of the dead. In the visions I have been shown, the crows are more than just birds. They are watchers. They are silent arbiters of fate. I saw a man, dying of dehydration, crawl to the shade of a lone dead tree. A single crow landed on a branch above him, its black eyes fixing on him with an unnerving intelligence. It did not call or move. It simply waited. The man felt in his delirium that the bird was not waiting for him to die, but was waiting for his decision. He could give up, let the blackness take him, and the crow would guide his soul to whatever came next. Or he could fight. He could find some last, hidden reserve of strength and crawl onward. The crow was a crossroads embodied, a living choice. It was the spirit of the desert, offering him two paths, one of life, one of death. The man, staring into the bird's unblinking eyes, saw his entire life flash before him. He saw the faces of his family, the reason he had started this impossible journey. With a guttural cry, he pushed himself up, his body screaming in protest, and began to crawl. The crow watched him go, then took flight. Its duty fulfilled, the choice had been made. This is a truth that is often forgotten. The spirits are not always predators. Some are neutral forces, embodiments of the natural laws of life and death. The crow was not evil. It was simply an agent of transition. It offered a choice, a final moment of clarity. It is in these moments of absolute extremity that we are closest to the machinery of the universe, to the gears that turn behind the veil of reality. We are forced to confront our own will to live in its purest, most primal form. The horror is not in the crow, but in the terrifying absolute freedom of that final choice, made alone under a merciless sun, with only a black-feathered angel of death as your witness. Now, imagine a different kind of trap, not one of spirits or monsters, but of time itself. I have been shown places in the wilderness where time does not flow in a straight line. They are like eddies in a river, places where the past is not gone, but remains present, tangible. I saw a group of migrants stumble into an old, ruined settlement from the 19th century. The buildings were crumbling, but as they walked through the ghost town, they began to hear things, the phantom sound of a blacksmith's hammer, the laughter of children who had been dead for over 100 years. They saw figures in period dress, moving at the edge of their vision, always disappearing when they turned to look directly. They were not ghosts in the traditional sense. They were recordings, echoes of a time that was still playing itself out in a loop in this specific location. The group was walking through a living memory, but the danger was real. The longer they stayed, the more disoriented they became, their own sense of time beginning to fracture. One of them began to speak of events from his childhood as if they had happened yesterday, while another could not remember what he had eaten that morning. The place was infectious. The time loop was beginning to pull them in, threatening to make them part of the recording, to trap them in that 19th century ghost town forever. They realized they had to get out when they saw one of the phantom children stop and look directly at them. its eyes wide with a curiosity that was not part of the recording. The echo was becoming aware of them. They fled, their minds a jumble of fractured memories, escaping the town just as the sun set. They had not just crossed a border of space, but a border of time, and it had nearly cost them their own place in the present. This is a subtle horror, the fear of losing not your life, but your very existence in the river of time. These visions drain the soul, but your presence here, listening, offers a strange kind of strength. Every soul that joins feeds the voice that whispers from the darkness, allowing these warnings to be heard.